I define heteronormativity, I mean, there's not just one definition for that, but I would begin first by saying that heteronormativity is a concept that questions gendered and sexual norms. And the two go hand in hand. It's hard to talk about sexual norms without talking about gender norms. However, sometimes I talk about heteronormativity and gender normativities. And I talk about them in plural because I think that it depends on the context, and there are many ways in which norms become hegemonic in a given society or culture or community in such a way that people who do not fit within those gendered or sexual norms are discriminated against, be it a symbolic kind of discrimination just by being made invisible, be it a material kind of violence, as in human rights abuses, as in not having access to material benefits. You know, that's one of the arguments for same-sex marriage, is having the access to the hundreds or thousands of benefits that heterosexuals have access to. So it's partly about an analysis of sexual and gender norms in a given society. The other part of it is, and that says something about people's identities, but the other part of it is how do institutions and cultural and social practices reproduce these kinds of norms? And what does that tell us about how heterosexuality is privileged in a certain society? And I think the best way for me to explain that is to give an example. If we look at both, various kinds of governments, right-wing, moderate, leftist, most governments in the world use a traditional notion of the family, whether it be to defend the so-called traditional family, or whether it be to argue that the revolutionary family should be at the forefront of change in a given society. And in both of those cases, it tends to be a heteronormative family that leaves out lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgender people, but a much broader range of people who simply don't identify in normative terms. And that includes people who identify as heterosexual. So the other thing that I find useful about the term is that it's not only referring to sexual minorities, for example. It's not only referring to LGBT people or anybody who does not identify as heterosexual. It refers also to various groups of heterosexuals, and I think that's under-discussed in these debates. And I also think that sometimes when we use the term, that it's automatically linked to LGBT rights struggles or sex workers or groups that supposedly don't fit within a kind of normative heterosexuality. In fact, we should also be talking about women, female-headed households, migrant families, various kinds of families and household and intimate relationships that don't fit within the norms of a society.